Hey, what's up guys? In today's video we're going to be checking out the made in England Orange Switch 6, a single pivot all-mountain machine that I've really been enjoying testing in the local trails of Scotland. Stay tuned to learn a few of the details and how it's been performing in this review on loamwolf.com. Let's go. Yes, this is the Orange Switch 6, and in their vast and slightly confusing range of bikes, this is their conventional single pivot driven 160mm or 6-inch travel all-mountain machine. It's got a mullet wheeled setup, hence the Switch name, with the 27.5-inch wheel in the back and 29-inch wheel up front. And yeah, it's made out of their conventional aluminium in-house in Halifax in England, which really gives it a unique look. It still very much looks like a orange mountain bike, and it has a little bit of a unique character to it as well. But we're just going to cover the brief details very quickly before we get into the ride impressions, the bit that really matters in my opinion. If you do want to learn more about this bike, then head to the article in the description below where I'll do a full write-up where you can really learn the nitty-gritty details. But yes, 160mm rear travel paired with a 160mm travel fork. It is a aluminium 6061 T6 aluminium frame that is made out of a combination of some CNC machined parts as well as some sheet metal that is folded and shaped to Orange's liking to really create a unique looking frame, very shapely. There's not really a single kind of straight flat bit of metal or a tube on this bike. It's all, yeah, very purpose manufactured, and then it's welded by hand in England, giving it a really overall premium feel, but certainly it's not necessarily the most kind of conventionally clean looking frame, but certainly packed full of details that really makes it to some people's liking, including myself. I think it's a really nice looking product and definitely exudes some high quality feelings. The Switch 6 uses Orange's conventional single pivot design, but Orange has lowered this main pivot to reduce the anti-squat figures and to obtain some slightly increased progression. So even though it's just a standard single pivot frame, it has gone up to roughly 6% of overall leverage ratio progression, which definitely isn't much, and you'll definitely want to use an air shock packed full of volume spacers, or just a coil shock that's been tuned, or maybe has a hydraulic bottom out to deal with those higher forces towards the end of the stroke. Orange has added plenty of room in the front triangle for a water bottle. It mounts on the underside of the top tube, and then they've added a new safe system, their kind of storage system, which sits just above the bottom bracket in the down tube and has a little bit of space to pack some of the essentials and keep them off of your back in a pack. The geometry doesn't really have any standout figures. It's very kind of contemporary, well-rounded all-mountain geometry. One thing that is notable though is for a mullet setup, this has a very long rear end, 450mm, and as we'll speak about a little bit later on, I think this is very smart and definitely has some characteristics that I've absolutely loved about it. The rest of the numbers, fairly contemporary. Head to the article to check out the geo table there. Orange is currently offering the UK market with 3 different build levels: the launch edition spec, which is kind of a special one, the pro spec that I've got here, which is their entry-level build at £4,900, and then the factory spec, which comes in at £6,800, which is, yeah, decked out with some of the really nicest kit you can get. And they also offer a frame-only option with the same Fox Flotex performance shock that I've got here for £2,900 and a choice of a couple of colours. This pro level build is definitely is a bit modest, I would say. It's not decked out in super flashy components. Fox performance level suspension with the grip damper. Same for the rear end. You've got a mainly SLX drivetrain, although with a GX crank on this one. I think it's meant to be an SX crank on the standard build. You get a E13 LG1 aluminium rim set on the Orange Strange component brand hubs. And these are wrapped as standard in a pair of Maxxis Minion Exo casing tyres, although I swapped them out, or asked them to be swapped out, for a set of Exo Plus tyres just to handle the abuse that I was expecting this bike to have. And then it's got an SDG Tellis dropper post on there, which is certainly a good performing option, but I was a little bit disappointed to see that it has a 150mm drop on this size large and goes up to only a 170 for the size extra large. Braking duties are handled by SRAM's Guide REs, which are kind of a rare brake set to see these days, especially spec'd OE, but kind of combine the old guide lever with a code caliper, and they're definitely solid performers. Certainly not the flashiest build kit out there, especially in terms of kind of perceived value for your £4,900, but the frame is high quality for sure, and as we'll talk about in the ride impressions, it doesn't necessarily add up to a bad time out on the trails. Getting the right setup on the Orange Switch 6 proved to be okay. I did struggle a little bit to find the right blend of compliance and support on that fork, but in terms of the rear end, it was fairly set and forget. In terms of just setting it, I ended up on 28% sag out back, giving me a fairly nice blend of characteristics overall, and fairly good balance. I did find that the stock bar height was a little bit on the low side, so I swapped that out for a slightly more comfortable one-up bar with a little bit of an increased rise on it. And very quickly, I was left in a comfortable position where I was ready to attack the trails. Before I received this bike, like I mentioned earlier, I asked for the tyres to be swapped out from the standard Exo spec for a set of Exo Plus level tyres, just to add a little bit more kind of security for pushing hard. Given that it's an all-mountain bike, riding around the Tweed Valley here where I was testing the bike, it's definitely not kind of easy terrain on a set of tyres, so I just wanted that little bit of extra peace of mind. That took the weight of the bike from 33 pounds as delivered for the size large up to just over 34 pounds. Once an insert was added into the rear tyre as well. So certainly it made a slight detriment to the overall agility and lightweight of the bike, but it's still a very respectable figure for a 160mm travel bike these days. Climb and performance on the Switch 6 was absolutely solid. Once the seat post is up at my height, the 76-degree effective and actual seat tube angle actually proved to be very comfortable and definitely not too slack. Many people may complain that it's only got a 76-degree effective seat tube angle as well, but many taller riders end up with a much slacker seat tube angle than the quoted effective angles on other brands, because often the actual seat tube angle is slacker than 76 degrees even. So yeah, for me, I was left in a comfortable position with my long legs that left me, definitely well centered in the bike. 450mm rear end length really pays dividends on the climbs, putting plenty of weight on that front wheel. I find that a lot of mullet bikes with their shorter chainstays and the smaller rear wheel can really leave you feeling out back over the axle, and with a light front end. I didn't feel any of that on the Orange. And then the pedaling platform is not insanely stiff, but it's definitely a nice comfortable kind of spot where you're not reaching for that lockout lever very often. And it's always there and fairly easy to access as well if you do need it. So definitely no complaints there. And overall, some fairly comfortable climbing for the Orange, especially given it's fairly low weight, which absolutely helps you on the way up the hill. One slight detriment to the Orange's performance on the way up is going to be for riders in the chunkiest of climbs, where the 170mm crank spec plus a fairly slammed bottom bracket can leave those pedals in risk of clipping objects on tech bits of climb. So yeah, certainly worth paying attention to, maybe looking to swap out those cranks for something slightly shorter if this is a bike that you're looking to buy and you're really wanting to attack technical chunky climbs. But on the descents, that low bottom bracket really comes into its own and you feel really nicely integrated into the bike. That's usually something that you'd feel on a mullet setup anyway, where you're just kind of safely behind the front wheel, behind the bars, and in a position where you don't feel like you're ever going to go over the bars. The low bottom bracket also comes with real benefits to the cornering performance, for me at least. You just feel really nice and low to the ground, and it makes carving a hard turn really nice. Combining that with a fairly stiff chassis, and this is a bike that I've really enjoyed pushing hard through slightly more groomed bike parky style terrain, certainly for trails where you're not necessarily gassing it to flat all the time. You've got plenty of good landings and then really nice supportive turns. This being an absolute hoot with that slightly longer rear end than most mullet bikes, helping to keep plenty of weight on the front wheel, meaning you're really nicely balanced in between the wheels and can just absolutely rip the turns. That suspension is also really nice and supportive. You've got plenty of kind of mid-stroke support. It's not necessarily the most supple off the top in the world, and certainly it can lack some bottom out support if you're really charging hard, but with the stock volume spacer configuration, I didn't find myself smashing into the bottom out bumper all too frequently. So I think they've found a nice blend, and it's only going to be the most aggressive riders who are probably going to struggle with this. Braking performance is pretty reasonable. It definitely firms up a little bit if you're dragging the brake, so riders with better technique are probably going to prefer this, but it's not unmanageable even for serial brake draggers like myself. Overall, the blend of stiffness and compliance definitely errs on the slightly firmer, more supportive suspension, slightly stiffer overall chassis feeling. So if you're looking for the absolute most planted, ground-hugging, terrain ironing feeling, this isn't going to be the bike for you, but it does give a really nice engaging ride where you can work the terrain, you feel the terrain below you a little bit, and you just feel connected, and it still holds its own. When you're pushing hard, it doesn't flex and wallow everywhere. In terms of overall quality, this is certainly a frame that looks a business. It's all the details are pretty well covered. One thing I'd love to have seen is a slightly better chainstay protector on there. It's just got a very thin rubber tape fitted to it. I did see in kind of prototype photos, or when they were first releasing the bike, that they developed a kind of better, more shapely, thicker rubber protector to go on there. So I'm not sure if that's something that will come with production bikes, but it's definitely something that I'd like to see. If not, stick on some VHS tape and call it good. But yeah, otherwise, not been any cable rattle of note. It runs fairly quietly, although stones can flick up onto the down tube, which doesn't have any protection on it either, and cause a bit of noise there. And then when you do really have a hard bottom out or just a real slap down to the ground, the chain can create a bit of noise. But otherwise, there's not been a creak or much of a rattle out of it throughout testing, which is really nice to see and definitely gives a high overall impression of quality. But at almost £5,000, yeah, the frame quality is high, there's no denying that, but the overall build that you get for that £5,000 compared to many isn't fantastic. I'd probably look to go up to the £6,800 factory spec if it were me, just to, certainly still be paying quite a lot of money for the bike, but get the really high-end premium quality components that you may be wanting. But this stuff hasn't detrimented the performance too much. I don't think the fork is the most refined out there. I'd like to see the Grip 2 damper fitted to it for increased tunability. But the Guide RE brakes have been solid. The drivetrain's been absolutely flawless. The one thing that hasn't been fantastic in terms of durability is the wheel set. The rims are potentially on the slightly softer side. The spokes came loose after the first couple of rides on both ends, and then the rear wheels come loose a couple of other times since, even with a little bit of spoke prep added to the spokes. So yeah, I'm not too sure about the build quality on those wheels, but otherwise the components have been very solid and well selected. But yeah, I'd always like to see slightly better value there. But when you consider the high quality frame and the made in Britain kind of engineering allure to it, and the stunning paint job on it, I love this colour, potentially you'll feel a little bit better about it. For people looking to buy the bike, the storage system in the down tube is going to come in handy from time to time, I'm sure. For me, it's not something that I was using that often, but when I did occasionally stick a tool or something in there, it did its job. The door is fairly easy to operate and stayed tight, stayed put at all times. But one thing I didn't do is fit a water bottle to it. In the past, I've tried with bottles mounted upside down, and I was never able to find a bottle and cage combination that stayed put and didn't end up ejecting the bottle on the ground. I do know that a fidlock system tends to work better if it's upside down than a conventional bottle cage would do. So potentially that's the way to go. And it's something I'd love to see included with this bike, just to make use of that frame, the way that they've set it up, and give the customer the best end experience. But factor in that extra, I don't know what it is, 50 quid or so, to put that fidlock bottle on there, and you're going to be good to go. Overall, if you're in the market for a fairly simple, high quality overall frame, and you love that orange look and just the idea of the made in Britain kind of vibe of the frame, then the Switch 6 is definitely not going to be a bike that is going to make you unhappy. The balance given by that slightly longer rear end and the mullet setup has been absolutely fantastic, and it really excels in slightly smoother bike parky terrain and just logging miles, because it's nice and lightweight overall and pretty damn efficient pedaling platform. But it's not going to be the bike that really irons out the terrain as best as some of them, and it's probably not going to be the bike for the hardest charging riders looking to gas to flat everywhere and get a little bit too rowdy. I hope you guys have enjoyed checking out this video on the orange Switch 6 Pro. It's definitely been a bike that I've enjoyed testing, and for the right rider, it's going to be an absolutely fantastic machine. Give us a like if you've enjoyed it, leave us a comment, let us know what you think of the modern day orange bikes, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more awesome content on awesome bikes like this. Thanks for watching, catch you out on the trails.